just to kick things off, we are members of Canary Media, your favorite nonprofit news entity covering the transition to clean energy, and we wanted to put this on to basically bring our readers and supporters together in digital space, and uh, you know give you a chance to kind of chat with our team and think through the big trends this year, what we're covering, what we're looking out for, what we think might happen. And yeah, as you know, we're a nonprofit. We rely on reader contributions to keep this going. So thank you all for your help in making our December fund drive a big success. And we're gonna kick it off with some questions to the team, but then we really want this to be driven by all of you asking questions. So you can see the Q&A bar. Put your own questions in, upvote the ones you also want to see answered, and we'll try to get through as many as we can in an hour. So here we go. Oh, and we'll also be recording this, so you get to keep a copy and relive the memories, or share it with your friends. So yes, without further ado, let's get going. I'm Julian. As I said, I'm our host today. But you might know me from writing about energy storage, or the manufacturing efforts to bring clean energy factories back to America. We're gonna just do a quick round of intros, so the face to the byline. And let's start with Sarah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you write about? What should we know about you?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah. I live in Massachusetts, and I cover basically anything that's going on in New England. Yeah, that about. And I've been with Canary for about a year now, and it's been an awesome year.
That's true. Yeah, you're part of the big momentous coming together last year of Energy News Network and Canary Media, and yeah, made us a nice big happy family here. Speaking of which, Catherine, let's have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Catherine Krozik. I also came over with the ENN Energy News Network crew that merged with Canary a year ago. I just was alerted that it was like a year ago, February 1st. I do kind of the same thing here as I did there, where I am managing all the newsletters that hopefully you guys are getting in your inboxes every morning. We have our daily newsletter that has a roundup of what's going on in the US, as well as our latest Canary stories, and then 4 newsletters that come out Monday, Wednesday, Friday from the Northeast, which Sarah writes, and then Midwest, Southeast, and Western regions. So yeah, I do that, and I do some social media, and I do a bunch of other like audience engagement things. So I'm mostly here because I know a lot about what is going on pretty much up to the day. So
yeah, and you're monitoring all the regions, all the intel coming in from around the country.
Things happening everywhere.
Yeah, it's a powerful position.
I try.
And Maria, how's it going in wintry New York these days?
Very cold and snowy. I just saw the low this week will be 1 degree, which is exciting. But yes, I'm Maria Galucci. I'm a senior reporter with Canary based in Brooklyn, New York. I cover also a variety of topics. I've been focused a lot on heavy industry decarbonization lately, so steel and aluminum and industrial heat, also geothermal, next generation geothermal, offshore wind, really anything that in the clean energy umbrella. And I've been with Canary for over 4 years. I think I joined when we were 6 months old, which is insane how time passes so quickly, but it's been a great ride so far.
Coming up on 5-year anniversary as a company.
Yeah, in April.
So yeah, stay tuned for that. We've got to do something exciting. Allison, how's it going?
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Allison F. Takamura, and I'm based in Golden, Colorado. I cover building decarbonization efforts, policies, technologies, especially heat pumps. I am a heat pump like spotter. So if I go on vacation, I'm like, oh, a heat pump. And I'm just always looking for them. And let's see, I'm staff writer at Canary. I also author the Electrified Life column, which focuses on what we all can do in our homes and lives to decarbonize. And it's great to be with everyone.
Awesome. Okay, and Jeff, let's finish it up here.
Hi, thanks, Julian. Thanks, everyone. Hey, I'm Jeff St. John. I'm Chief Reporter and Policy Specialist here at Canary Media. That's a nifty title. I kind of cover the waterfront, but I am personally fascinated in some of the wonkier issues having to do with, clean energy, utilities, power grid, power systems integration, and all the challenges about how do we make the most out of what we've got on the grid? How do we integrate renewables, battery storage? How do we get demand side resources, everything we can do in our homes and buildings and with our electric vehicles to kind of balance and lower the cost of the energy transition? And of course, lately, like everyone else, I've been learning as much as I can about data centers. What's up with those things?
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's jump right in. To kick it off, I wanted to let each of our panelists here expound on their trend of 2026 that they identified. We did a roundup of that at the end of the year, which I think they're already bearing out. These things are, like Maria, you were writing about geothermal. What does the year hold in store for geothermal energy?
Yeah, so the main project that I highlighted in that piece you mentioned is what Fervo Energy is doing in Utah. So Fervo, as you might be aware, is developing what's called an enhanced geothermal system. So basically using fracking techniques to create reservoirs of hot water underground where they don't naturally occur. And they've had a lot of buzz and excitement over the years, but this is the year that they're actually planning to turn on 100 megawatts of electricity in October, and that's 100 megawatts of what will become a 500 megawatt project. So it'll be what they say will be the largest project of its kind in the world. And it's also really notable too because even as all this money is flowing into next generation geothermal space, there still haven't been like a lot of actual utility scale projects to come online. So this will be a good step in that direction. And we just recently wrote about last week, they quietly filed for an IPO to raise funding for this effort and other projects they have going on. But yeah, so Fervo is the biggest name, but I think they're kind of certainly not the only ones. And other startups are going to have exciting projects. They're going to develop those projects this year too.
Yeah, so that trend's already making some buzz. I mean, it's not every day you get a real IPO for a clean tech company, and seems like big things to come. And then how about Sarah? I think you were looking at options for New England to get more clean power. What do you anticipate on that front?
Well, I was kind of focusing in on this one particular evolving story in way northern Maine, the very tip top there. It's been identified as having fantastic wind resources, but for a wide variety of reasons, they haven't actually managed to build much by way of wind generation up there. We're talking onshore, not offshore. And but right now, we're at a hopeful moment. Both the Maine Department of Energy and ISO New England are working together to do RFPs for both the wind generation itself, but then also a much needed new transmission line, because right now there would be no way to bring that much power from northern Maine down into the New England grid, but it has fallen apart a few times before. This has been something they've tried several times, so I'm going to be tracking it. It brings in a lot of interesting issues about how communities respond to large scale development, the need for more transmission, and the different ways that additional generation can affect affordability. So it really touches on a lot of the biggest issues that we're looking at right now.
Awesome. Okay, and Jeff, I think it was virtual power plants that you chose to highlight, which it's something that we've been focusing on in our writing for quite some time. But what's new in 2026 for the virtual power plant concept?
Well, it's a bit early yet to know, and obviously this January has had a lot of other things that are more pressing on, I think, the minds of people who live in this country. But what is a virtual power plant? It's just a bunch of stuff that's out there in people's homes and their businesses. They're rolling batteries in their electric vehicles and stuff like that can basically be orchestrated to mimic or stand in for the services that a big centralized power plant provides, the power grid. The nice thing about those is that they're stuff that people are buying already, and there's stuff that you can deploy both in a modular scale, a little bit at a time in little chunks, and then kind of build it up, and that you can deploy quickly. And this has been a long time topic of interest to me since the early days of when I was working at the former place we used to that kind of grew into Canary Media, called Green Tech Media, where we invented a term called the grid edge to describe all this stuff. And what was kind of an idea back then is now a true possibility. Now the technology is there, and obviously solar and batteries are by far the lowest cost and most quickly deployable resource we have to meet our energy needs, not just from a climate perspective, but from a cost perspective, right? So we're trying to figure out how to get that stuff trained and enlisted to solve problems like excessive costs of providing the capacity we need to keep the grid running during summer heat waves or winter storms like the one we just had now, how to use it to kind of avoid putting tons of cost onto people because utilities are building lots of power lines and power plants to serve data centers that may or may not show up. And after years and years of utilities, not necessarily, with a few exceptions, not really, I think, wanting to engage in that, because utilities make money by spending on grids and power plants, not by helping their customers do the job that those hard assets could do instead. We're kind of at the point where, with the affordability crisis, we really, I think, are getting to the point where we can't ignore that stuff anymore. And there are a lot of places where there's some exciting activity. But it's going to be the devil's in the details with these things. And we're really going to have to track how virtual power plants get enabled and where the old way of doing things is holding back progress.
Definitely. Okay, so stay tuned for plenty more on that at canarymedia.com. And Allison, I think you wanted to talk about the balcony solar movement, which is really quite new in the US, I think, and for a lot of people, but already showing signs of life this year, huh?
Yeah. So this is something that I'm watching closely. Plug-in or balcony solar are these solar panels that you can buy. I mean, they're like regular solar panels, but you can plug them in to a normal outlet at your home and get energy just like infused into your own home's kind of grid, right? And last year, Utah passed a bill. Was the first state to legalize these systems, to say you don't need an interconnection agreement the way you would with rooftop solar. These are small systems. You can install these yourselves as long as they're certified as safe. Utah was just the first of the dominoes. I mean, I think it's going to be. So last year, one state. This year, already 23 states have introduced legislation to get these things accessible to people. And I think it's really in part because of the affordability crisis that we're living in. Legislators want to show people that they're helping with the soaring prices of energy, and that they're giving people the tools and the autonomy and freedom to access these new technologies. These systems have really taken off in Germany, going from I mean, like thousands of systems a few years ago to an estimated 4 million systems. And what's interesting is, like to me, from a user perspective, was that really users led the technology and safety conversation in Germany, and kind of regulators caught up. And so I'm wondering, are we going to see the same thing here? Like, even though, I mean, the state legislators are being really proactive about introducing this legislation, are we going to see people just installing these systems anyway, beyond in Utah where it's legal? So yeah, I'm excited to report in kind of this vein.
Yeah, that's a cool one. And there hasn't been kind of a new like proactive push in sort of state level distributed solar policy in a while like that, like since the early days of the net metering push and community solar laws and stuff. So that one's going to be exciting to see. So I want to jump into the audience question. I did want to say, Catherine, did you have a quick theme or trend that you're most excited about before we get to the reader submissions here?
Yeah, I mean, just going off what Allison finished with, I've been writing a ton about the affordability conversation. It's my aim with, I write the weekly newsletter, and kind of my aim with that is to kind of bring people that are not quite as clean energy wonky into the fold. And that is the thing that everybody is talking about. It's coming up in like actual conversations I'm having with actual people. So just seeing how different states are taking on ways to solve that problem. Like what Allison is saying, are there new technologies? Are there things that that make sense to get people producing more of their own energy? We'll see.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for that. I was seeing a bunch of questions on the topic of data centers, which is, arguably the biggest kind of from a business standpoint, biggest storyline in energy this year. Let's start off with John asking, has any state figured out how to ensure, first, how do you see the data center driven increase in demand impacting the clean energy transition? I think that's sets it up for a higher level. I mean, I think the early framing was often this is going to be terrible for emissions. It'll push up demand for gas power plants, new construction of gas. We saw coal kind of bouncing back a bit last year and pushing national emissions up. But I think we're also seeing more clean energy concepts emerge to meet this demand too. So anyone got a specific story or example on how this could actually drive clean energy development?
I might try to jump in here. I'd like to think about data centers as if it can't happen, it won't happen. And I think it wasn't John, but it was someone else who asked, oh yeah, how do you figure out how to ensure that costs don't get shifted? There's someone else who asked, how do you figure out whether or not these data centers are actually going to get built or not? This is a really complicated area where and for someone asking about democracy, where kind of people going to their public utility commission or corporation commission meetings and demanding that their regulators take a really hard line on energy affordability might be able to make a difference, because regulators tell utilities how much power plant and grid they get to build for how much data center load they think is going to happen. And they also get to guide, regulators get to guide the tariffs under which those data centers are going to take service. And a tariff is just basically how you pay your bill, what you pay for in it. And there have been a number of states that have been starting to say, if you're going to come in with a couple 100 megawatts or a gigawatt size data center proposal, we're going to require you to basically promise to keep paying your bill for 10 years or longer, whether or not you actually stay open that long. And there are other kind of, characteristics of these data center tariffs. Now, a lot of folks say that's not enough because when you build a power plant, you got to pay it off over 30 years or so, not just 10 years. But it's a gating point to start to kind of separate purely speculative data centers from something that's got a little bit more earnestness behind it. The state of Ohio, I think, after the big utility there, AEP Ohio, put in a data center tariff, their data center construction or their load, growth forecast was roughly cut in half from about 30 gigs to 13. And so these are a way to at least start. But then you got to start talking about what data centers do to the grid. And it's not just energy, it's also capacity. And capacity is basically what you need to make sure that everyone on the grid's got all the power they need when everyone's drawing as much power as possible, right? You know, winter cold snaps and summer heat waves, essentially. And there are a lot of interesting approaches to providing capacity for data centers in a way that makes them quote unquote flexible. I'm sure you guys have seen data center flexibility. It's all the rage. There's a bunch of people like Tyler Norris and Doug Lewin and Nathan Iyer who have all said, you know, these are all energy experts who have explained how flexibility works. Not surprisingly, all three of those people were hired by Google.
There's a pattern there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can combine a lot of stuff. You can actually like compute less, do less AI kind of training during times when everyone else wants power. You can build batteries on site to supply your own power. You can go out and contract for like virtual power plants. I've seen, you know, there's a group, Rewiring America, that kind of advocates for electrifying homes. It's talked about if data centers could give money to people to put in more efficient heat pumps, and then maybe some tools to shift when they use electricity away from peak, that could be a solution. The trick is to get the regulators, the utilities, and in parts of the country where you have kind of regional power markets run by kind of independent system operators or transmission organizations, to get those rules in place. Because can you force a data center to really turn off when everyone else is sucking as much power as possible out of the grid? How do you know that that data center's promise of getting a whole bunch of other people to turn their power down or send their battery power back to the grid is going to come through? These are the places where the rubber meets the road on these things. I know I've been talking too long, but I'll just finally end up with gas turbines. You can't get a new gas turbine manufactured and put into your new power plant proposal until 2029, 2030 right now. So if anyone really does want to get their data center into a grid that's constrained, you're going to have to figure out another way to do it. And you can turn around solar and battery projects a lot faster than that. So.
Yeah. And Maria, jumping off your geothermal point earlier, I mean, is that emerging as a viable kind of round the clock commercial product that could help data centers be clean?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely driving the data center demand is definitely driving a lot of interest and investment in next generation geothermal. And it's called next generation because they're using tools and techniques to develop these projects in places where conventional technologies can't, because they don't have like the hydrothermal reservoirs readily available. So like Sage Geosystems, for example, has a deal with Meta. Fervo is one with Google, and there are other examples. But sort of to Jeff's point in terms about like the speed to scale, I think that it'll be, I mean, these are new projects. And so it'll be really interesting to see how quickly they can come online. I mean, in theory, right, they could provide that around the clock electricity and clean electricity that data centers need. But there aren't any real world examples quite yet. Almost there with Fervo, and by the same token, you know, we see data centers investing a lot or signing agreements for nuclear fusion and fission, so like kind of new fusion, new nuclear and traditional nuclear. And again, it's like the big question is, will they actually get the power they need in the next 5 years or 10 years or ever? And if they can't, what could they do to meet that demand?
Yeah, no, those fusion contracts make the advanced geothermal look like an incumbent technology. So hopefully we'll see some of those. Anyone else on the data center one? Or we've got I'll just add, I mean, I've been covering it from a battery angle, and you know, a lot of the studies of data center impacts are identifying it's really like a discrete number of hours in the year that the grid wouldn't be able to support a new data center, and the rest of the hours it's actually kind of fine because we overbuild our grids for, you know, a single peak. And so we've seen a few cases where the data center arranges for a battery to get added, you know, on the spot in the grid where they want to build. And at least in one case up in Oregon, the data center developers paying the utility to build the battery, or at least, paying for the battery, which the utility will then be able to control and manage for the grid overall. And that's at least like one positive future where you could imagine the data centers that have literally billions of dollars to play with here could end up subsidizing infrastructure that makes the grid cleaner and more efficient, and enables the data center to be online a few years earlier than they otherwise would, but also helps everybody else, as opposed to the very real possibility of all the regular ratepayers kind of subsidizing these data centers that then may or may not get built afterwards. So definitely look out for more of those, and kind of there's a lot of evolving business models, I think, to take advantage of this. So I thought this was an interesting one from Graham. What energy stories may break through the noise of the midterm election campaigns? And I feel like there's kind of two parts to that, because one is probably like, how do we as journalists try to break through? And there's going to be so much attention focused on the midterms pretty soon, and then separately, like, are energy stories going to be meaningful drivers of behavior going into an election season? That's how I would read that question. So who anybody want to jump in on that?
I'll hop in a little. I'd say we already saw kind of a preview of that at the end of last year with the very few elections that went on, and we had a few stories about it as well. You saw it at a really big scale with the 3 governor's elections that were going on in Virginia and New Jersey especially. You saw that energy affordability was a huge thing. And I think I said it already, and maybe I'll just keep harping on the same point the whole time, but that is the number one way I see energy stories making their way into the mainstream, and how it's going to be really important for those politicians, those people running, to show, well, what are they going to do to solve it? And like in New Jersey's case, it's like, well, we'll support offshore wind because generating more power will be good for everybody. It's 2 governor's races, and then the Georgia Public Service Commission race as well. And you saw that 5 Republican seats flipped to 2 Democrats, and they were also like kind of pushing for clean energy and generating more energy. And what's the fastest way to get more energy happening? It's solar, and it's storage, and it's clean things. Like Jeff mentioned, gas isn't going to be built for a really long time. So I would say, just like the affordability crisis, or whatever it is you want to call it, is going to just keep coming up, and it's going to be up to those people to kind of translate what are the big picture solutions, like what are the actual ways to solve it that aren't just utility bill credits, or like small things that last a short amount of time. So that's my take on it for sure.
I would like to just kind of piggyback on what Catherine just said. Affordability, for sure. I just wrote a story about how affordability is going to play out in Massachusetts policy conversations and elections this year. And what came up that was really interesting to me is that, like Catherine said, translating things into actual like systemic solutions is important, but there's also this narrative. It's going to be really important for people on the renewable energy side to really find ways to get their narrative out there, because this kind of lingering idea that gas is cheaper and that renewable energy and energy efficiency are just costing money in the name of some sort of green ideals is kind of hard to displace. Some person I talked to said basically people just got it in their head, when natural gas was cheaper, that gas is the cheap way to go. And it's really hard to get people thinking in new patterns. And I think that's going to be a huge part of how affordability shapes midterm elections, is who figures out the right way to communicate about what the problem is and what the solutions are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to build on that, if clean energy is the solution, how do you convey that it is the solution to the problem that everyone has, and not just some fantasy or something we would really like to have? Like, how do we convey that it's actually like it needs to happen, or because without it, we're not going to be able to continue to afford things? I don't know.
And just building on that, we're starting to see more pushback from some Democratic lawmakers and attorneys general, clean energy developers that are pushing back against Trump administration policies that specifically target wind and solar, and kind of making it harder / impossible to get permits they need for developers to build their projects, kind of coming up with these really I don't know what the right word, but deliberate efforts to basically stop projects from getting built. And a lot of the conversation, or I talked with Senator Martin Heinrich a few weeks ago, and he was saying basically all of the cheap electricity you need is being stuck on the Interior Secretary's desk, because he's the one who has to sign off on all of these. So all of these projects. And I'm oversimplifying here, but essentially, yeah, that like the affordability, the fact that like there is a pathway to having cheap, clean electricity, and it's being intentionally blocked, and could we unblock it, I think is a big narrative we'll hear this year too.
And I am curious about how that translates into like midterm storylines, because it's not something, like people can run for Congress based on wanting to push those out of Interior and stop the blockage there, but they won't be able to like stop Doug Burgum from being the secretary. But any thoughts on kind of how candidates might operationalize concern about that bottleneck in the midterms as opposed to the next presidential?
That's a tricky one, because a lot of the costs that are being borne by utility ratepayers right now come out of two things. One, in very specific markets like PJM, which is the biggest, the most populated kind of grid market from like Illinois to Virginia, is these capacity costs where basically crazy data center forecasts are forcing everyone to pay through the nose for power to provide capacity 3 years from now. Like, if you're in Virginia, which is the biggest, has more data centers than anywhere else in the world and wants a lot more, you can, as a state, regulator or as a governor or lawmaker, maybe take direct action on that. If you're in New Jersey, it's not the data centers in your state that are getting built. It's the ones that are getting built in Virginia and Ohio and Pennsylvania that are causing that problem. So it's more of a regional problem. But the other big cost, which is pretty much everywhere, is the cost of the grid. The actual poles and wires and transformers and stuff. And that's so complicated because a lot of it is utilities didn't really need to handle load growth until recently. So they kind of underinvested, and utilities make money by spending money on that stuff. So they're really not incentivized to find ways to spend less on it. And that's a place where state lawmakers can instruct state regulators to do something, but that something is going to be complicated and it's going to take time to translate into lower costs. I think it'd be interesting if there's any way for politicians to get with communication specialists to try to convince people that the value of basically telling them you're paying less, your utility bills are up more, but they're not up nearly as much as they would have been if we hadn't done this stuff. That's kind of a tricky political pitch, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also I've been tracking how gas prices actually are rising and expected to keep rising. So if everyone, to Sarah's point, has that, early 2010s view of gas as the cheap thing, and now we're exporting a significantly large and growing amount of it just off to the global market and taking it out of here, and now American gas consumers are kind of competing with the global market in a way they never used to. I don't know if that's going to break through, but it's happening from a factual basis, and that's going to affect both electricity production and home heating. Yeah, actually, I mean, I think this one from Matthew is kind of a fun, if we're into the realm of speculating about political events unfolding. What happens to clean tech generally and your specialty areas specifically if current global tensions lead to a major economic downturn worldwide? This is, we are not stock investment advisors, so we are not telling you what to do with your money. But what do we think would happen with, if we get some kind of global recession stemming from all the chaos out there?
Well,
I haven't thought about this before this moment.
Everything's going to be more expensive, and we'll all have less money. So I don't know if we might want to throw to Allison on this one, because one of the things that individual people can do if they have the means and if they have the right supports is to invest in their own domestic household energy economy. And this is where backup batteries in your stove and behind your refrigerator play a role. This is where balcony solar plays a role. It's also where holistic tighten your energy, your envelope of your house and like use less energy plays a role. And electrification is intimately tied into that stuff in a way that could be a replacement for gas. But I don't want to get too complicated with it.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point, Jeff. One of my husband and my friends, a couple, they were telling us how, they are a little bit worried that the economy is going to tank a bit. And so they have liquefied some of their assets and invested in their home energy system. So they got solar for their roof, they got a battery, they got a new EV. And we're like, wow, that's really proactive thinking. Like, yeah, this is going to save you money in the long term. And so it makes sense as an investment. If you have the means, I think that's a great way to kind of hedge against future volatility. And I've also heard that fossil fuel free stock indexes have performed better than fossil fuel stocks, or ones that include fossil fuel companies. So that's another thing to kind of maybe be aware of. Also, not a financial advisor. I have no expertise in it. But also, I will be watching for if on-bill financing becomes more of a thing. Just like we have mortgages for our homes, our mortgage utility is going to be offering heat pump mortgages. You don't have to front all this money in order to recoup these savings that you'll see every month. Can that just be part of your monthly bill? And there was recently a really great study by Switchbox, a clean energy analyst that looked at what the policy in New York would be if New York went ahead with its all-electric new buildings standard. So this code was supposed to go into effect at the end of last year, but it has been challenged in the courts, and New York voluntarily decided, we'll hit pause on this for right now. But this analysis by Switchbox showed that people would save, even without federal incentives, because those had gone away, or were about to expire, that people would save thousands of dollars over the lifetime of these appliances if they were lucky enough to get one of these new homes. They would save money on their mortgage, they would save money on their energy bills. And so I think this is also a way that politicians can drive home clean energy, electrification. These are affordability measures. Like, if we look at the data, this is gonna save you money. I know that there are people saying that this is a green scam, but that's just not true. That, like, have them show us the data. We haven't seen it.
Yeah. I was thinking to the kind of global downturn thing, like, I wonder if it could be beneficial to clean energy deployment in the sense of, gas power plants have been going up in price, and there's kind of a almost bubble dynamic there with the AI demand, and solar is clearly the cheapest. And, so if you have a bit of a cooling off, do people gravitate towards just building the the thing that's like the cheapest kilowatt hours, and that would be clean stuff. And also a kind of recession might take out a bunch of the AI, more speculative AI development, and that could leave room for, serving, building power projects for the rest of us on the grid. But yeah, definitely not. I mean, it's still going to take a lot of investment to transition the system over to 100% clean, if we can even get there. So recessions tend not to be great for that sort of thing. Any other thoughts on that speculative one, or we can? There's a lot of good questions out here, so thank you to everyone.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add that because these technologies allow you to generate your own power, like locally, you don't have to depend on rent-seeking companies, that sell you the fossil fuels so you can burn them, and you have to keep doing that. Because you can just generate the power yourself, like these are really great energy security financial investments for the long term. So, I imagine that an economic downturn could, as you say, Julian, kind of push um, uh, communities and countries in this direction.
Well, it'll sharpen the focus of regulators and politicians on really riding herd on utilities to make the most of these resources that people are deploying in a way that reduces the cost that we all bear for keeping that system that's overbuilt, right? We got to spread the capacity utilization. That's the term, right? If we use the grid we got more often, and if we can sell more electrons over that grid, more electrons sold over the same grid equals lower cost per kilowatt hour of energy you get over that grid that you got to pay the utility. The trick is to get everyone kind of working and rowing in the same direction, and these incremental and iterative steps to kind of make that possible.
Well, it's I see a heat pump question that's gotten a lot of votes. So reader saying, my wife and I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. We have an EV heat pump with a gas furnace supplement. Would love to be able to use the EV as backup power during outages, but where's that technology? And also the heat pump is very expensive to run in cold weather below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Do we have any thoughts on these? Allison is our heat pump person, but others have also covered the EV kind of to home technology as well.
Real quick, check out Wallbox and Decibel, DCBEL, two companies that do make bidirectional EV chargers, and then try to figure out whether or not your local utility will allow you to plug them in or not.
Because in general, you do need a more expensive charger plug, right, to go both ways.
You do, and you often need permission from your utility because that's a source of energy that's flowing up through your house and theoretically back past the meter and onto the grid. So.
And then it also depends on the vehicle model. Like I think certain models and car makers like really wanted to lean into that, like Ford with the F-150 Lightning, which was discontinued. But there are potentially dozens of people around the country who are running their home off of a Ford F-150 Lightning battery when they need to. Yeah, so I would say it's definitely not a mass scale thing, but if your car company allows it and you can get afford the fancier bidirectional charger and have need for backup power, it is possible. Like people have done it in America.
Yeah, we're kind of at an inflection point where it might be getting to the point where you can actually do it as a commercial proposition, but not there yet.
And then Allison, any thoughts on the
heat pump? Very expensive to run in the winter. I know the heat pump is trying to find that thermal energy that's in below freezing temperatures, and it's definitely there because when it's like 0 degrees outside, that's still way above 0 degrees or absolute Kelvin, right? Is that, I think that's the term I'm looking for. But it is a big temperature jump to bring it to a comfortable point in your home. If you're using an air source heat pump, I would ask I would ask maybe an energy professional to come give your home an energy audit, a checkup for the energy performance of your home, because the more like insulated your home, the less energy it'll take to warm it up to a comfortable temperature. So that would be the first thing, and then the second thing is like, is your heat pump working correctly? Because if there's anything wrong with the installation, like if the refrigerant line is a little kinked or something, then maybe that's why that's why it's having to work so hard, and making your bills really high. So yeah, those are the two things that I would check out. Go to your heat pump technician, yeah, I think your heat pump technician would be able to like give it a double check, or maybe another heat pump company. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that, but yeah.
Because that was another one of those cases where the old data keeps circulating, right? Is that in the 80s the heat pumps actually really couldn't do very cold weather, and then a lot of people remember that and kind of malign the technology for that. But there's newer ones, and I think some are better than others. But
yes, yes, all that's true. Yeah, and so if the heat pump is older, or if it's a model that's not built for extremely cold temperatures, then that could be an issue. And then you might want to upgrade. But I mean, if it's a newer one, I imagine that it should work.
There is a thing where some heat pumps, they have a resistive heating element. Sorry, I swear I'll stop fast. It basically kicks in like a big old like electric stove, and that takes a ton of power, right? I've talked to people who make an interesting point that maybe programs that make you tear out your gas or even oil furnace to get a heat pump incentive should let you keep that oil and gas furnace. That way you run your heat pump until it gets really cold, and then you start burning that fossil fuel to get you through those really cold winters, but you burn about 1/10 as much as you would have otherwise, and you don't have to spike your electricity usage right at the point where everyone else is spiking it because it's so cold.
Mm-hmm.
This is the kind of area where policy discussions can get really kind of counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
So,
interesting. Well, let's do lightning round. There's more to get to, so I'll see how many we can cross off in the last 10 minutes or so. Okay, this should be a quick one, I think. Any thoughts on this Congress passing something worthwhile? A permit reform bill, for instance. Any takers?
I think
I wish I had my ear to the ground more, but I have my ear to the ground of people that have their ear to the ground. So I'll let you know in the newsletters if that ever happens. But I still, without action on offshore wind and all of the blockades still happening, I don't think they're going to let it happen anytime soon.
I would argue that whatever Congress can do to reform the way that the federal environmental review under NEPA is done, or how reviews are done on federal-owned lands, is either minor compared to the other challenges that clean energy development face, such as state-level permitting, county-level conditional land use permitting, and of course, and this is the big one, interconnection of new resources to the grid. I think federal reforms are a pretty slender part of that. I also think that the federal reforms that could be impactful, like changes to the way that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission kind of regulates the expansion of transmission networks, or, for example, whether or not Congress could order the Trump administration to instruct Interior Secretary Doug Burgum to stop holding back clean energy permitting processes at the Interior Department. Those might be impactful, but they don't seem like they would necessarily be in the cards at this time.
And I do think, for what I've gathered and covering the permitting reform, is, there was bipartisan interest in it, but then when it became clear that the Secretary Burgum's holding up all these renewables kind of with a whole new tactic that wouldn't be covered in the permitting reform, it killed any appetite from the Democrats to participate, because it's like, why would you make it easier to build fossil fuel stuff if the clean things you want built are getting held up sort of outside of the framework of federal permitting. So in that sense, the executive branch policies are actually kind of making it harder to pass the kind of reform that probably a lot of fossil fuel companies would have preferred to have passed. Like they'd like the more streamlined permitting, but you know, you can't be like trying to speed things up while arbitrarily slowing a bunch of things down and, you know, thinking no one's gonna notice there. So let's see, other question. Okay, this was at a local utility investors meeting. We saw a lot of hostility to community solar gardens. People seem to believe that the hooking them up to the grid is prohibitively expensive. How to counter this? So that's interesting. I mean, I'm curious if that is like a co-op where it's kind of customers are the investor or owners, or if it's like a municipal. You know, so community solar, there typically is some kind of state level law that enables it and like sets the compensation rate that the developers can get for building that, and then, you know, customers subscribe and get some savings. And so, I mean, in a sense, there is some subsidy that's you know, baked into that, right? But, you know, it gets into all the arguments over the value of solar and how much the distributed attributes are helping solve other problems, and how do you reward those. But anyone want to take this one on the price impacts of community solar for everyone else and what to do about it?
Email us and tell us what utility you're talking about. It depends is the very overly simplistic answer to how community solar works in your particular service territory.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of states have them, and in theory, it's a great way to give individual customers access to the bill savings from solar that they can't get if they don't happen to own their roof or have a viable roof in a house that they own. Which, as a renter, I'm, you know, partial to the idea that you shouldn't have to be a homeowner to be able to tap into the benefits of distributed solar. But, you know, I think generally there's a way to strike that balance, and it's kind of happening in a political conversation in state legislatures in a way that people can come to a compromise on. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Okay, this one's after my own heart. Would love to hear about the status and viability of green hydrogen and also wave energy. I'll let any of my colleagues.
Julian, you're up.
Julian, you're the wave guy.
I'm the wave. Okay, yeah. So wave energy is I think the type of energy that, like, I get the most questions about, sort of out and about in the world, and that has the least actual presence in the energy system. And the problem is, like, there's a lot of energy in the ocean, but that also tends to destroy whatever equipment you're putting out there to harness the said energy. And there's a long and, you know, honestly kind of a amusing history of startups plowing a bunch of money into these, you know, pilot devices that they take out into the ocean, and they get hit by a wave and sink immediately, and then you have like $1 million just down at the bottom of the sea. So yeah, definitely not expecting that one to have a big role. But I did cover one that's kind of interesting, where they put it on a jetty or like a seawall, and it's these floating things that pump up and down when the wave hits the wall, and so they're kind of like a little more sheltered from the open ocean, and then easier to kind of connect to, like, power a harbor or a coastal city or something. I think it's called EcoWave Power. So they're still at the very small scale, but they're at least very aware of the history of failure in the in the wave power. And then green hydrogen we've covered a lot. Definitely there was a lot of excitement under Biden and with the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits. And then there was this 2-year long sort of internal debate among climate advocates and the IRS about how to exactly score companies that wanted to get the tax credit for green hydrogen and how clean it had to actually be. And then basically nothing got built, and now the market's kind of collapsed. And I don't know. Anyone have any prospects for green hydrogen having a meaningful role this year?
I would just second what you said. I think if it's going to have a meaningful role, it probably won't be in the United States. Possibly in Europe, most likely in China, I suppose, which seems to be developing actual projects, although it's hard to know at what scale and how clean the hydrogen is. But it seems like, well, I don't know, I could be wrong, but it seems like maybe this year's not the year for green hydrogen in the US. But with that said, I do have to jump early. So thank you, everybody, for joining, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Oh yeah, thanks for joining us, Maria.
Yeah.
And it is, yeah, we're coming up on the end, but this is a great one to close with, I think. Are there any changes coming to the daily newsletters in 2026? Content, format, and maybe anything else our readers should look forward to from Canary Media this year?
Okay, on the daily newsletter front, nothing is on the agenda right now, but we're publishing so many stories to the point where we can't fit them all every day. So maybe we'll change something to make sure we can fit them all very nicely and like still keep the roundup going. If you have any suggestions, if you have anything you do or do not like, please email me. You can find my email, or you can like reply to one of the newsletters you get, and it'll get to me. But let me know, because I would like to like survey everybody. I haven't done that in a while to see what they do and don't like and what they find valuable and all of that. So let me know.
And we should say that was the product of a lot of creative work and kind of, revamping last year, right? So what was the goal again? Like we had these daily ones, and then wanted to also have the weekly.
A merger of bringing over what we had at ENN, at the Energy News Network, and combining it with what Canary had already, which was Canary has a newsletter where until a year ago you would just kind of get every Canary news story for the day, and then at ENN we would have a roundup of the latest stories from around the country, and they weren't necessarily from us, but we would write up a little something about them. So now you kind of have all that together in one, and hopefully people find it useful. But
I do.
if anything, thank you. If there's anything you don't love about it, or like maybe anything that you think you would like to see in it, let me know. So awesome. I do tend to survey at ENN. I would survey pretty much every year to see what people do and don't like. So we'll do that again.
Yeah. Okay. And then any other things to look out for from us? We'll have more live events. We're I think the lineup we haven't rolled out yet, but that's been a lot of fun to roll out to New York or DC or the Bay Area and bring people together in person. Sometimes with live music. There's a lot of cats.
See, we can find ways to incorporate them.
Yeah, exactly. The cats are a big presence in our news meetings, our editorial meetings, but not as much in the published product. So we'll see if we can innovate on that front. Yeah.
A lot more stories are happening. I feel like that's awesome. Like we've been really rolling them out. So
it's been a really nonstop couple of weeks since the year got going. Yeah, there's really no time to catch the breath, and it's just like you're trying to get one news story out, and there's a new news thing that seems even more important, and we're just kind of hustling to keep up with all of it. So yeah, I think with that, I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you to all the people who asked questions. Sorry to the ones who we didn't get to. There was some very detailed and thoughtful things in there. But you can always reach out to us, like like Catherine said, respond to the newsletter or on our author pages. We have our email addresses, so you can reach us individually. We love tips or thoughts on a story or constructive criticism of any information we might have overlooked. So yes, it's just great to be in touch with y'all and kind of build that community together. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to all my colleagues here, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Julian.
Bye. Thank
Ooh,
you all.
yeah. Thanks, Julian. Bye, everyone.